Good evening and welcome back to GAN TV. Now, today is 9/11 Memorial, and I'm here with,
Gustavo Bella.
and my name is Malik Lenzonzo, as you already know. Um, 9/11 completely changed the way we live, not only here in America, but the entire planet, the globe, the world. Today, with my partner here, we're going to start a little conversation, trying to understand how that event occurred, but also how that event changed our lives. So how you been doing, man?
Really well. Today was kind of a somber day, reflecting. I was living in LA at the time, and I was working for a major telecommunications firm. And it was about 5:15 in the morning. Got to the office, and people had mentioned, hey, something happened in New York. I guess all the lines are down. And obviously, I have a brother who lives in New York, an aunt who lives in New York, and my mother. And I tried, we couldn't get through. And then eventually, history revealed itself. And that was a day that the globe was literally shaken to its core.
Absolutely, absolutely. It was tough. And then you say you were in LA.
Yes, I was living in Los Angeles at the time. I lived in LA from 1990 to 2007. And I remember that day. Everyone, I think, you do those moments in life where you remember exactly where you were. And I remember with some of my colleagues not really knowing what was going on. We couldn't reach people in New York, New York, New Jersey, because I guess the first plane hit the main towers and
Yeah.
all the. And so when I reflect upon how far we've come,
Mm.
20 years later, with regard to the war on terrorism.
Well, we're going to talk about
Yeah.
that, how far we come. I just wanted to share a little bit
Yeah.
my experience with 9/11. As a foreign student, I came in this country 2001.
Wow.
Just a couple of months after that event occurred. And I remember I was sleeping in my apartment across the street from Georgetown University,
Mm.
and my cousin just called me and said, "Hey, listen, the Pentagon being attacked." I couldn't believe that. I told him straight up, say, "Listen, leave me alone. Let me sleep. Nobody gonna dare to attack the Pentagon."
Mm.
But
Yeah.
it was actually true. He keep insisting because I hang up and then he keep calling,
Yeah.
say, just get out, get out. I far from the Pentagon. Just
Yeah.
get out, man. I mean, that. It was unbelievable.
Yeah.
It was unbelievable.
It's amazing now, even when I reflect, it's almost like it was a bad dream, but it was a bad dream that I think that unfortunately was a wake up call for the
Well,
vulnerabilities and how oftentimes we don't know the skill and alacrity of our enemies. Because these guys weren't sophisticated people. They were people who looked upon where we had weak points,
Right.
took advantage of it,
Right.
and a series of events worked to their advantage, unfortunately. Because as you know, the terrorists only have to rewrite once. We have to rewrite 1,000 times.
Absolutely.
And so
Absolutely.
that day there was a minor victory, but as you see, the face of the world, the face of travel. So we had the terrorist pandemic
Right.
in 2001. We have COVID-19 in 2021, and the American spirit and the global spirit remains resilient.
You just mentioned something important, our vulnerability. The fact that we now know that it's a possibility for America to be vulnerable. And I think this is maybe second to I don't know which one is bigger, but second probably to Pearl Harbor.
Pearl Harbor. Oh, definitely. Oh, definitely.
You
I
know?
think. Yeah, and I
Yeah.
think, and even there were some signs with Pearl Harbor. There were some hints before. They said sometimes that the president wasn't quite sure, but in this case, and even with President Bush, there was supposedly a report that said Bin Laden
Right.
due to attack. And so sometimes hindsight is always 2020, but the reality is that I think that President Bush did exemplary job under the circumstances, and I'm glad to see in today's ceremony that President Biden allowed President Bush in many
Yeah.
ways to kind of take the lead, which shows his security in
Yeah,
himself as a
absolutely,
president.
leadership,
Yep.
absolutely. Because you know what, when you are president of the United States, you're president for everybody.
Yep.
Both for Republican and Democrats, and those who voted for you and those who did not.
Exactly.
And that shows his leadership, reaching across the aisle. Now, let get into a more serious questions here, especially how the, the event of September 11th changed our lives.
Yeah.
Because we went from, oh gosh, we are vulnerable, to how can we make ourselves more secure.
Exactly.
So what happened after that?
That's a fine balance
Yeah.
too. Remember, even the travel. Who would have thought that you'd have grandmas taking off their shoes and people taking off their belts and all that? And even there's a time that the Pentagon, before that, you could actually go into the Pentagon without having to make appointments. Everything has
Travel.
changed, and so travel
Our
and
lifestyle.
lifestyles, and also, but both that also come biases, implicit biases, and real biases that people may have with regard to people who come from the Middle East countries. And so that's something that we've all had to, I think, wake up to, in that bad people come in all shapes, sizes, colors, ages. And unfortunately, these individuals represent a particular skill, I mean, a particular group of ethnic group. But my opinion is, I think that when it comes even to homegrown terrorism, we have here in the United States, terrorism is terrorism, and I think it's important for us to identify it, dismantle it, and destroy it.
You talking about, you talking about on terrorism. Do you think at that particular point we took our eyes off the domestic terrorism?
I think domestic terrorism, I think, has always been people can say domestic terrorism started with the KKK and even before that, but I think we were rested on our laurels. I think we became too comfortable, and I think that the intelligence community did its best to provide actionable intelligence through human intelligence and signal intelligence. I believe they did their best to brief the president and the appropriate officials, but as you know, the intelligence is a fluid thing, and so people might say go left, and in fact you should go right. But I can say, as I sit here today on September 11th, 2021, that all the people who are involved in that decision-making process, how to move forward, are skilled professionals. And I know that it's going to take a lot, because there have been a lot of attacks since then that people never hear about. You hear about the 9/11s, but there have been a lot of other stuff that has been quietly thwarted because of cyber attacks, and there are other avenues that the U.S. government has deployed over the decades to make sure that that never happens again. A lot of people have died.
So do we? I mean, you see, we mentioned Pearl Harbor, and when that occurred, it looks like a particular group of people, and especially our Asian brothers and sisters, were kind of targeted. And when September 11th after happened, it looks like Arabs, American in particular, that particular group, went through hell.
They did, and you heard how they even had people who infiltrating mosques in New York. They had undercover people who were trying to see whether or not there was sympathy towards the terrorists. People say, well, listen, most of these guys were Saudis. Yet we wound up in Afghanistan. And so you wonder if it's a question of the GPS was off that day. But the reality is that when it comes to terrorism, it can be localized, it can be metastasized. And I'm hoping that this generation of leaders, thank goodness, the adults are back in the White House.
But what happened to the American GPS? I mean, we have 15 hijackers on the September 11th came from Saudi Arabia. How come the GPS took us to Afghanistan?
It's amazing, because you never know what intelligence and goals. There's a lot of smoke and mirrors sometimes, and I think that perhaps folks were trying to be a bit too creative, and were trying to maybe even some vendettas that took place from years ago. But the reality is that not obviously Saudi Arabians are different than Afghanis, are different than Iranians, and so I was not in the room when those decisions were made, but I know that a lot of people, particularly some of my good friend, the late Ambassador Joe Wilson, wrote a very nice piece of what he did not find in Niger, when he talked about the yellow cake and all the other stuff. So it's he tried to sound the alarm, and you saw what happened with his ex-wife, Valerie Plame, in terms of her being outed. So it was a lot of moving parts, a lot of misdirection, and unfortunately, 20 years later,
20 years later,
we've had a lot of blood and treasure lost, trillions of dollars lost, not to mention the lives of American blood.
Absolutely. Now it's also important to remind people, our viewers, that part of the reason why we went to Afghanistan is because the intelligence tell us clearly that Osama bin Laden was hiding somewhere in in Afghanistan. Those of mountain of Tora Bora. So the attention kind of redirect our attention on that particular area. we knew that Afghanistan was a safe haven for most of the terrorists,
Mhm.
and because the American government at that point have asked Afghanistan to just give up,
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
and they didn't give up to that safe haven for a lot of those terrorists, including Osama bin Laden. So, it was a time to go in and put an end to that
It was, and
situation.
I think maybe they hoped that if they were to address the situation in Afghanistan,
Right.
collaterally, other people say, well, look what the Americans are doing in Afghanistan. We better not
We will not.
mess around. So all I can say is that I think this was a 20-year lesson.
Yeah.
Hopefully we did learn quite a few things, both good and bad. And as we look forward to trying to sew up that situation, it's going to be very difficult. This is not an overnight fix. It took us
Right.
20 years to be in there.
Absolutely.
And it's not going to happen over the next 20 months. And so I just hope that that the U.S. administration,
Mhm.
that our allies are able to work with the governing body, which is
Yeah.
the Taliban in
Absolutely.
Afghanistan, and see what we can do to make sure that there are less bullets and more say ballots.
Yeah. Absolutely. No, no, we've done the shows on Afghanistan and the withdrawal of our military. Today, September 11th. Do you think? Can you confirm what we already said on this show that the president was absolutely correct? Can you imagine this anniversary coming upon the fact that we still have our men and women in Afghanistan?
Yeah.
Do you think he did the right thing?
Yeah, I believe now he did. And I think history will show
Yeah.
these kind of decisions. You're always going to have a split of authority. You're going to have individuals who can try to cherry pick parts of a decision making process to their advantage. But in the end, I think when you look at the totality of the circumstances,
Right.
President Biden did the best that he did under the circumstances and the intelligence that he was given at the time. No one has a crystal ball, and if someone does, I'm sure that there'd be a lot of people going after it, trying to find it.
Right. I share your opinion. I believe most of good decisions are usually unpopular.
Yeah.
And then after that, I think history will show us that that probably one of the best decisions he have done throughout his 4 years in office.
Yeah, and think remember he's only been in office for 8 months, and so that was a real jolt, a
Yes.
real shock and awe to
Absolutely.
the system. And I'm glad once again that we have mature, sober, skilled people who are in positions, because I'm not quite sure if the previous administration had how they would have handled such an event.
Did the President Trump shy away from that decision?
I think it's funny because he's talking more and he's giving more of his opinion now as he's perhaps in between his McDonald's snack runs.
That's after dinner.
Yeah. And so I think right now it's always easy to talk from the sidelines. When you're in the arena and the harpoons are being
Yeah.
thrown, there's a whole different perspective. But once again, he was a duly elected president. He's no longer president. We will throw in all of our support between for Joe Biden and those in the administration, as well as our allies in Europe and in Africa. Let's not forget about Africa.
We're gonna get to them, man.
Let's not forget about Africa.
I won't let you know without
Yeah,
talking
that's
about
right.
Africa. That will be probably our second segment and the last one.
Mhm.
Now, today, we both of us applaud the president for his decision, and I think that was a well structured, well calculated decision. A lot of criticism, but at the end, we know that was a grown up decision to make. He knew it's going to be unpopular,
Yep.
but actually he did the right thing. Now, some of our friends and across the aisles believe that the fact that some of our supporters, the interpreters and people who help us through this war, some of them we have left them behind. But at the same time, if you see this, transitional government in Afghanistan, it looks like they're willing to cut in some slack, to let some people get out of Afghanistan.
They are, and matter of fact, sometimes they're even acting as tour guides to get them out there. And I think that's very important. I think there's a certain measure of good faith that they're trying to demonstrate, because you want to deposit something in the political currency bank.
Yes.
And to be able to withdraw upon it at a certain time. And I think right now, if the Taliban were to just do a scorched earth policy, they're not going to give themselves a chance of success. Now, remember, I'm not a big fan of the Taliban, but you have to work with the devil that you're dealt with.
Yeah.
And so And as someone who feels comfortable talking to devils and angels, I think it's important to get as many decision makers in a room, see what can be had, and hope that the solution will help more people rather than less. But I believe that
But
The
that's the
American,
reason why I always want them to consult with you, since you deal with devils and angels.
Yeah, all the
So
time.
you have tremendous skills to understand both sides of the equation.
yes,
Now the Taliban, you and me don't trust them, but at this particular moment, do you think uh, the Taliban will do their best to at least create some space to maneuver? They've started with, showing and telling the international community that they will be different from the 90s, although this transitional
Yeah.
government still looks the same,
Yeah.
same old people that was there around the 90s. But they already signaled to the world that it's going to be different.
Yeah.
Uh, so, why do you think the Taliban will act differently this time?
Yeah.
Is this because when you need to run a country like Afghanistan, is mainly depend on foreign aid, mainly depend on international aid? Do you think you have to negotiate or talk to America because they still can block a lot of stuff?
Well, I'm not going to invest too much in what the Taliban says. I'm more
Right.
concerned what they do.
Right.
And being that they know that they're the only game in town right now,
Mhm.
people will say and do things to their own advantage, looking
Right.
out for their own interests.
Yeah.
And so I think they're probably playing both sides. They know that there are no other actors, either bad actors, good state actors, non-state actors,
Mhm.
other than the Taliban. So I believe that between the administration, whether it's CIA Director Burns,
Right.
Secretary of State Blinken, and even the President of the United States, the Taliban have held on to this angst for 20 years.
Right.
So they have 20 years of resentment, 20 years of feeling that they've been occupied. And I think that they're going to do some things to throw people off, but they also know that for their survival, they're going to have to be able to negotiate. Don't get me wrong. This isn't this thing where you can as a handshake. I think with these guys, you have to shake their hands, look at their hands, watch their hands,
Yeah.
watch their eyes, and realize that they have a history of violence,
Mhm.
of terrorizing women, and fighting like hell. And so Mazar-e Sharif was obviously one of the first sites way back when Johnny Michael Spann was the first person who lost his life. And since that, we've lost a lot of lives. It's time for the bloodshed to stop.
Yeah.
It's time for the Taliban to come to the table. And I hope that the negotiating partners will look for the health, education, and welfare and the well-being
Right.
of the Afghan people.
Absolutely. But talking about the Afghan people, there was a sense that it's going to be the government. This transitional government will be a little bit more open. But it seems that when I look at last time I checked, there was no woman.
Yeah.
There were no women, and they said that they will be giving women some space to operate. Now we know 20 years after that country was open, and women have a chance to test
Yeah.
freedom. How do they gonna manage a group of people, young people and women that now understand how freedom look like? How they gonna manage that?
The toothpaste is way out of the tube, and I think right now you can't put the freedom and what women have experienced. You can't put that back. You cannot go back in time.
Right.
Once people taste and smell, then as President Bush says, the natural inclination for the human spirit is to
Yeah.
be free.
Yeah.
And once you have that, why would someone want to go from freedom back to the dark ages? Why would someone go from freedom back to slavery?
Right.
And so I'm hoping that the Taliban
Do you
will.
think that's going to be a challenge for the Taliban?
It's going to be a talent, but I think they're going to try to resort to their old methods. But life's only constant is change, and I hope that in this case they will change for the better and change
Right.
with modern times.
Yeah. No, I do honestly believe that they have no choice
Yeah.
than to at least meet the American people in the middle.
Yeah.
And part of that will be that the harsh application of the Sharia or whatever methods they use, and I think they will be more likely to tune down a little bit. And I do understand the reason why other group like ISIS-K
Yeah.
will just emerge, because they already know the Taliban are signaling to the American people that there will be a slash change in the way they operate.
And you realize that ISIS-K and Taliban, that they're kind of enemies right now, and that ISIS-K feel that the Taliban have compromised themselves. They've become a little soft, hanging out in Dubai. For them, that's you have to be out there the rugged amounts of Tora Bora,
Right.
and near the Khyber Pass. But the reality is that times have changed, negotiating tactics have changed. The internet, social media has been a whole
Completely
since
changed.
from 2001 to now.
Yeah.
It's a whole different landscape. The topography, the societal topography, the social media topography has changed, I think, for the better. And as long as we continue to hold down the neck of the Taliban in a way that's not constricting their air completely, but realizing, hey, listen, we're going to negotiate, but we have to do it in a way that's mutually beneficial. Americans can't just lay down and let these guys run the show. Hamid Karzai learned way back when that governing is not an easy thing. And the Taliban, although they're media savvy, they're going to have to still be held accountable for their actions and their inactions.
Right. I wanna just say hello to this viewers of ours, Teddy, I believe, who was saying that the dynamics of the game have changed.
Yeah, it's true.
And that's exactly what you
You're
were
right,
saying,
Teddy.
brother.
You're right.
And she also continued to say that the dynamics of the game have changed. People desire freedom, exactly what you were saying. So now, part of the element to this equation is the fact that the Chinese, what happen to be our adversary, when we are stepping out, America was stepping out. Chinese actually didn't move a bit.
Yeah.
So, and they usually don't care about whatever the what you call the local politics is concerned.
Yeah.
All they want is just to put the money and control in the way that they know the best. So how that gonna play?
Yeah.
Since we already step out, and China, probably Russia is back then too. So how do you think this gonna be a play out?
Well, analyzing this, I guess I'm going to draw upon my previous life as a Olympic athlete. I don't really look upon China as adversaries, as I look upon as being competitors. I think that Russia, China, we're all in competition for resources, competition for democratic space, competition for loyalty. And so people can use whatever labels, but as an athlete, I look upon what can I do to prepare myself to outsmart, outwit, and win over my fellow competitors. Now, people play dirty all the time. Some people use drugs, right? And some people, in this case, use drones.
Yeah.
And so, in the end, I think that the United States and its allies are prepared to confront Russia and Chinese aggression into Afghanistan in a way that I think will be met with the war ready. I'll just say the United States is ready for any action, but not to answer it. You're right. Chinese do not care about human rights, right? They don't. They come in with money. They say, "Listen, we'll take care of it, but we want you guys out of the way." They're not about developing the local economies, developing the intellectual capacity of the region. They want to bring in their workforce, run the show, give you the money, and say, "Hey, get out of the way." It's a new era, and I'm not quite sure if that playbook will play well in Afghanistan or even in Africa, where things are starting to change dramatically.
Well, talking about Africa, I think that's our second chapter to this. We're going to just change gears. When we come back is to talk about Africa in relation to what's going on in the world, especially when it comes to terrorism, or what's the other term to explain what's going on in Africa.
I think right now there's a complete destabilization of the political status quo, and it comes in the form of terrorist networks and their enablers.
Absolutely. That's in the next. Well, welcome back to Talk to Me. I'm here with Mr. Gustav Mvala, four-time athlete and then Olympics track runner. Somebody who have a lot of experience in the world politics. Now we're going to change to our guest to Africa.
Yes.
So how September 11, what kind of relationship can we establish between Africa, what's going on in terms of security in the continent of Africa, and then September 11th?
I think peace and security are obviously issues that the continent has to be aware of. Maritime security, as you know, the Gulf of Guinea is ripe with piracy. There's been an emergence of Boko Haram. Back in the days, the emancipation of the Niger Delta Men, ISIS, Al Qaeda. And so you have those individuals who are starting to have their footprints there.
Right.
Many people will say, well, listen, September 11th, as far as we were concerned, everything was quiet in Africa.
Right.
Nothing, September, the terrorists weren't aiming for Africa. I understand it, but we live in an interdependent world.
Right.
And what happens in the U.S. doesn't necessarily stay in the U.S.
Mhm.
And so I am someone who, if given the opportunity, will work with regional partners to shore up, to make sure that the days of piracy, kidnapping, extortion, blowing up of pipelines, which are often regional issues. Those pipelines are often a governor who wanted more money, and so we know the game, but the game can have very dire consequences, and we don't want to allow the terrorists to think that they have any oxygen to breathe.
Safe haven.
Exactly.
Yeah,
No.
but you know, I like the fact that you said that the world that we live in today is interconnected, because keep in mind, I think in the 90s, Osama bin Laden at one point was in Africa,
He was.
and many times I think that at one point he was located. People found out, I think, during the Clinton administration, they knew he was somewhere in Africa, but they didn't take a shot. They didn't let him go. So whenever we keep our attention away from Africa, which is a place where they call it the next frontier.
Yeah.
And you're talking about the Chinese influence in Afghanistan. We have Chinese influence in Africa right now.
Well, we do.
So, and when you say that they don't care about, usually they only care about their self-interest.
Mhm.
They don't usually care about, human rights, all kind of stuff. How that gonna be playing in the future, where you see a land with so much potential when it comes to natural resources, but the security is not there.
Yeah.
Is that gonna be?
It's gonna be an issue, and look at how the Chinese even happen. You have these re-education camps
Right.
with their own. So if they treat their own, whether the Uyghur situation, right?
Mhm.
If they're mistreat their own, why would we feel that logically they would care about Africans? And so it all comes down to dollars, right?
Yeah.
And they say if you're not making dollars, you're not making sense.
Absolutely.
So for the Chinese, they want to make it a whole lot of sense. And they're realizing that the quote unquote dark continent is full of a whole lot of light. And that light is the light of an oncoming train carrying all sorts of gold, bauxite, titanium, oil. But we're putting on the brakes and we're saying, hey,
Right.
as Africans, we can develop this. And so I'm telling all of my Chinese friends, and I love China, I love all that they've done. It's time for you to allow Africans, if you're going to come to our continent.
But should the Chinese allow the African have to allow themselves for our demand respect? And I don't want you to just address the Chinese people. We have to be this generation of African leaders, intellectual,
Yes,
or politicians, people like yourself, myself,
activists.
and activists. I mean, isn't it a time for us to look at the eyes of our friends and the allies and say, you know what? The playing time is over.
Yeah.
And we want to deal with the world in equal partnership with respect to human rights, and enough of that is not enough for those dictators that keep being supported by forces like the China sometimes.
Yeah, and China, you're right. And I think it's not also, let's not forget the role of multinational corporations.
Right.
You'll find that the days of the Idi Amins, the Sekou Touré's, the Jean Bidel, Bokassas, those guys are dinosaurs for an era long. And you still have a couple of these dinosaurs who are treading in the 21st century. But I can say with a certain amount of certainty that the forces of change, the gusts of change, are across the continent of Africa. And you see how African despots are dying, being hospitalized. Isn't it funny that these dictators, and I'm going to use the word in the most virulent sense, that they will go to Europe for their medical treatment. That says to me, why then, if you're doing such a great job in your country,
Right.
why don't you go to the hospitals in Brazzaville, Congo?
It's
Why
like,
don't you go to the hospitals in Libreville, Gabon?
can you imagine the president of the United States go to the hospital in China
Exactly.
or in Russia?
And so it shows you how there's
The disconnect?
a disconnect, a hypocrisy, and it's almost comedic if it wasn't tragic.
Yes.
And so I wish all of these men well, and I wish them a speedy recovery from their foreign hospital beds.
Right.
But I wish that for those of us who are committed to Africa, and it's not a matter of being Afrocentric, but it's about saying, listen, we know this. We are educated. We
Right.
have the skill set. We can recruit people. We understand this. And so I know that when you're doing things in Libreville, I'm doing things in Equatorial Guinea, that there'll be a joint partnership.
Yeah.
And
But
we're bringing also our American friends and allies. We're not looking, this is not anti-Americanism. This is pro-Africanism.
I think being against Africa is against America. Is it against America because we know the contribution of our people from Africa to this country?
Exactly.
So it will be in the best interest of America to be involved and to support Africa. And there's a question here from our friend Teddy who's watching this show, was asking if there is a middle class in Africa. If you get a country like mine, where I come from, Gabon, small population, but there's no middle class. You have the rich, the filthy rich,
and the
extreme poverty.
exactly. And
So there's
the
no
filthy
middle-
poor.
And the filthy poor. And again, why is that is important to have a middle class? In America, even democracy is possible when you have a middle class.
Yes.
Without a middle class, forget it. There's no democracy because the people and those people in power, they know this little dirty secret. They know in order for you to keep these people in the bondage, poverty I'm talking about,
Yes.
you got to not create a middle class. So it's very important for countries like Gabon, maybe
Equatorial and Cameroon. So my calling, my pleading is to our fellow African brothers and sisters throughout the world and diaspora. Speak up, let your people know in the country that you live that Africans matter, that we have the capacity to lead and know when to be led. But the days of colonialism, neocolonialism, and dictatorialism are over. And anyone who wants to go back in time should go see the movie Back to the Future and be there the star, because those days are long gone. And I say that with absolute clarity and confidence. So I'm talking to President Biden and Kamala Harris, as well as leaders in Europe and Asia. Please, we deserve a seat at the table. As a matter of fact, we demand a seat at the table.
Yeah.
We have suffered, and we continue to flourish even in the midst of withering opposition from within our own country, as well as those external forces. So please, if you're serious about helping the African continent, have a laissez-faire attitude, but realize that when you say national security interest, what you're really saying is that country X has something that we want, and we'll take it. So let's not try to dance around the nomenclature.
Right.
We all have interests. We have political interest. We have national security interest. But in this case, we're acting about the human interest of the African continent and the billions of people there. 54 countries in sub-Saharan Africa, 54 different personalities, even though the Berlin Conference was very good about dividing us all up. But the reality is that we are really a force to be reckoned with, and no longer to be taken advantage of, abused, pillaged, and plundered. And I will do everything I can with all of my Olympic might, contacts, and resources to make sure that anyone who comes in with nefarious means will be met with severe roadblocks that will probably result in, let's just say, a few nosebleeds along the way.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, we'll get to the end of this program, but we never separate without telling to the African people that help
is on the way. We are coming to a country near you soon. We promise.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you again for watching. Please stay tuned. We always gonna come back with some conversation like the one we have today. Positive
and forward thinking. And my friend Malik, who's done tremendous things here at Gain TV, we look forward to coming to and you just rendering your support. We thank the callers, the listeners, those watching. Spread the word out. We're out here just as a platform for us to speak openly, frankly, about the direction of Africa in the 21st century. There are no supplicants here. We're real men talking about real issues.
Absolutely. Guys, thank you so much for watching. And we are looking for you to watch this. Your viewership is very important to us. Okay? So we talk to you later.